Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I am thrilled, and I mean just thrilled, to be here with you today to talk about something really important. We're going to follow up on what we were talking about yesterday, but first, I just want to say that I hope that you, right now, in this moment, that you're meeting this moment with a level of presence, that you're really here, right now, that you're accepting what it is that you find right here, right now, and that you're meeting with a level of compassion in your heart, right? Whether it's compassion for yourself and compassion for everyone else. And most of all, or equally as importantly, I hope that you're meeting this moment with curiosity, right? And this curiosity aspect, between the curiosity, well, it's also important, right? The presence, is really embodying what we're doing right here, right now, just to be 100% here now. That alone is just such a huge concept, right? And then the concept of acceptance, of accepting what it is that we're experiencing right here, right now. And then the next step of compassion and feeling that compassion for yourself and for everyone around you, right? Which compassion means to notice the suffering that you're experiencing and noticing the suffering that others are experiencing, and using that knowledge, that understanding, that the seeing, the witnessing of other people's suffering, using that to support them in their suffering, right? Whether that means taking action to somehow relieve their suffering, or if it means simply standing with them as they suffer, right? And then again, that curiosity, right? To want to know, not only what's making yourself or others suffer, but also just wanting to know, or being open to whatever it is that's coming and wanting to understand what is happening, rather than thinking that we have to control something, or thinking we have to avoid something, or thinking we have to somehow, be a certain thing in a certain way, and that's what's important. The real key of mindfulness practices is the curiosity, the open awareness, the loving and compassionate and accepting open awareness of what is arising in this present moment. And that's really what all of these practices are all about, right? It's getting us to that point, right? Where we are present, we are accepting of what we're finding in the present moment, we're compassionate towards everyone, ourselves and everyone else, and we're curious, right? An open acceptance of what is happening, right? All the practices that I talk about here today, in this podcast rather, are all geared to doing exactly that. And when we do that, right, we are optimized, right? Because when we do that, we are really aware of who we truly are. And that means being aware of our failings and our insufficiencies, and also being aware of our strengths and our power. And when we can do that, and again, it's only through the presence, the acceptance, the compassion, and the curiosity that we can get deeply into that we're, into that awareness of our strengths and our weaknesses, and embracing them both, right? Because that's who you are. And again, that's the acceptance part and the curiosity part. That's why those two, in this context, what we talked about yesterday and we're talking about today, which is kind of understanding who we truly are, right? That's really, it's all very important. The presence, the compassion is also very important, but it's that acceptance of what we find, and the curiosity that says, okay, I see this and I want to know more. Right? Because a lot of times what we're conditioned to do is to stuff away those things that we don't feel are, we don't feel the world wants to see, right? I talked to you yesterday about the, when I used to do these, I do guided meditations. I have lots of recordings, and sometimes people ask me, "Oh, do you have a recording on, forgiveness?" And I look, and I did it 3 years ago. So yeah, I have it, but I'm gonna have this phony pants voice going. I'm gonna be sitting there saying, take a deep breath and softening my voice and trying to be this person who I feel you need me to be in order for me to teach you how to meditate. But it's all baloney. It was never true, not even for a second. right? But that's what we do, right? We have this persona that we put out into the world, and that's what we feel is well, the trouble is that we get to the point where we feel like that persona is the real thing. And that's what we need that curiosity for and that acceptance for, right? To delve deeper, to say like, no, it's not this surface level. I need to know what's deeper down there. Right? Because as we talked about, what happens when we grow, when we're growing up, right? There's certain people around us from whom we take our cues, right? And these people are our friends, they're our parents, they're our cousins, they're our teachers, our coaches, all the people that we look up to, right? Of course, it starts with our primary caregiver. That's the one from day one, right? We are observing every single thing this person does, right? Whether that's a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, or whatever, godparent, whatever. We're observing everything this person does, and we're taking our cues from what that person does. So if that person is, always putting people down, as I said yesterday in my family, if the humor is always about making somebody else feel bad, and life is, and all the things that are coming out are all about being tough and putting people down and all that kind of stuff, well, then that's what we're going to grow up to be. That's what we're going to grow up to believe that is right? Like that's what we believe we need to be in order to be a good person, a morally good person, right? Because that's what that is. That's your morals, right? That's your moral compass when you're looking at that person, right? Who is either aggressive or maybe it's somebody who's passive and meek. In that case, that's what you're going to believe that you need to be, right? And ultimately what happens is we're going to stuff away all those aspects of our personality that do not meet that criterion. And that is where we start getting into real difficulty, right? So Carl Jung, I promised you yesterday I was going to mention this. Carl Jung, who's a famous psychiatrist, right? A psychiatrist, I guess you would call him. Yeah, definitely. But he, there's Freud and there's Jung, in terms of psychological, schools of modern psychology, right? And so, I'm not a big student of this, of the history of psychology, so I'm just going to leave it at there. But Carl Jung has a famous quote that says, "Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our life and we will call it fate." Right? And so what Carl Jung was describing there when he talks about the unconscious, what he's talking about is a concept that he developed throughout his whole career called the shadow. Right. So in his opinion and his philosophy as a psychologist, that each of us have this shadow side of us. Right. And that is that side of us that we don't allow to see the light of day. Right. We keep it very unconscious. Right. And those are the aspects that don't agree with that thing that we feel we need to be, right? A few weeks ago, we talked about cognitive dissonance, right? And this is a big kind of part of that cognitive dissonance, right? That you have your core beliefs, your core understanding of the world and yourself and how yourself fits into the world, right? You have this core set of beliefs that are formed, again, by your exposure to those people around you who you looked up to when you were very small, when you were very young, right? Like that's how it all kind of works, right? And so these core, beliefs and these core kind of concepts, right, are the thing that we are conscious of, right? Like that's what we form this thing, right? That becomes our personality essentially, right? And anything that contradicts that, anything that challenges that gets stuffed down into the shadow, right? Now, of course, for a lot of people, this would include sexuality issues, right? For me, as I told you yesterday, it included a lot of, challenges to my compassion in a weird way, and it was always, and the thing about this is that the shadow is always going to be very confusing, or most of the time is going to be very confusing, because what you're talking about is this unconscious understanding that you have, right? So it's always there and it's always part of your programming, right? But you don't understand it. And that's how what Carl Jung says is that, we call it fate, right? We just say, oh, that's the kind of thing that always happens to me, or that's just the kind of person I am. I'm always this or that, or, I'm always, I always have a hard time making friends, right? Because I don't know, I'm just awkward socially. It's just the way I am, right? Well, no, what that really could mean, and obviously, every person is different and it's a very complex, kind of subject here, but what it could mean is, just using the example of somebody who has like social anxiety their whole life, well, that could very well mean that the reason you have this social anxiety is because you're not comfortable being who you really are, right? And that's what to me that quote by Carl Jung means, right? Is that it's going to rule your life, and you're going to call it fate. You're going to say, oh, it's just the way I am. It's just the way I was brought up. It's just the way my body makeup is, right? But none of that is really true, right? None of that is self-evident, right? Instead, that's just a belief that we carry with us that helps us to reconcile what is really happening, right? Remember the cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance is this same thing happening in more of a conscious level, right? The cognitive dissonance is, I really believe in this politician, right? And this person's always been a very, high level of morals for me. And they speak out against the things that I'm against. They speak for the things that I believe in. I send this person money. I believe in this person very, very highly, right? And then one morning I wake up and I open the news on my computer, and I find out that this politician whom I respect and admire so much was just caught at doing something that I find reprehensible. And now all of a sudden I have this this dissonance, right, in my conscious understanding of what's happening here, right? Like I believe in this person, but now I'm seen as, oh my gosh, it's not who I thought I was. So now my mind has to make a resolution here. Right? My mind has to come to some sort of understanding, or else it's very uncomfortable, and I'm not going to be able to sit quietly and be comfortable until I figure out the resolution for this, right? So the resolution, when we're talking about cognitive dissonance, the resolution becomes something like, oh, well, the news must be fake, right? I'm not going to believe this about this person because everything my conscious mind everything this person represents in my conscious mind has just been completely contradicted. So in order to resolve that, I can just say, I don't believe the news. Now I'm good, right? I don't have to reconstruct my whole belief system, right? And so the shadow is that happening in a subconscious and an unconscious way, right? And so the shadow does not mean bad, right? And this is something that's a prevalent theme in all of these podcasts that I do, and it even goes into the other one that I do with Adam Asdell, the Learning to Surf. We just talked about this today. That just because we call something dark or negative doesn't mean that it's bad, right? And this is true of emotions, this is true of thoughts, this is true of physical sensations, right? That pain and pleasure are the same exact thing. They're just sensations of the body, right? And a negative emotion is just as important and just as valid and just as helpful as a positive emotion. Right. And so this concept of, having this shadow in ourselves, a lot of times what happens is we feel shame, if we dig this up, because it contradicts this moral compass that we've constructed or has been constructed for us, through our entire childhood and with the people we were exposed to and the teachers and the coaches and the parents and the aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins, all that, all those people, right, have formed this moral compass. And if part of who we are sits outside that zone that we find acceptable, well, now we feel shame over who we really are. And that is where, that nothing but confusion and discomfort and suffering is going to come out of that. right? Because generally when we believe that that thing that is in our shadow, again, whether it's maybe it's some sort of sexual thing, like maybe you grew up feeling that, you're attracted to people of your same sex, right? But in your family, that was not okay, right? We're not those kind of people, right? We're normal people. Look at the girls, or look at the boys, we don't do that in our family, right? So now, because of that moral compass that is created by your family, and again, that's the thing that you have, that's your everything, right? That's what you're literally basing your entire understanding of the world on this, right? It's your entire thing. It's your entire logic center, right? And here you have this part of you that is a natural, a natural part of your existence, which is your sexuality, right? The thing that turns you on. You don't have control over it, right? Which we're, at least, even in conservative circles these days, they're accepting the fact that our sexuality is not something we can control, right? So even the most uptight people now are kind of realizing that, not all of them, but some of them. And so the idea then is that, when you feel that this thing inside of you that is part of who you are and something you don't have control over, and you're thinking it's a bad thing. Imagine the confusion that's going on inside of that person that we're describing right now. Imagine the suffering that's happening inside that person. Imagine how difficult that is, right? And what's that going to bring up, right? Like how is that going to manifest? And that's the fate part, right? So maybe you're going to be very homophobic, right? Maybe you're going to be very bigoted. Maybe you're going to be maybe you're going to have anger issues as a result of this. Maybe you're going to be very impatient with people who, again, going back to that fate aspect, I feel very uncomfortable around gay people. I don't know what it is. I just can't handle it. It's just who I am. I don't know. I don't feel bad. I'm not bigoted. I support gay rights and gay marriage and stuff like that. I just can't be around people like that. Right? And you just chalk it up that it's just my fate. It's just, that's who I am. Well, the reality is that that's not who you are, right? The reality is that there's something else inside of you. Right? Now, that's not to say that all of us have not every person is a latent, homosexual, waiting to come out, but many are. And it doesn't just have to be sex, though, right? It can also be, as I said, like just my very core of compassion, which I have come to embrace as this is the everything for me, right? And when I can allow my compassion and my excitement for the love of the world, when I can let that flourish, that's when people tell me, like, man, you are the most amazing person I've ever met. Like, I mean, of course I'm not. I mean, there's nothing amazing about me, but yet, it comes across that way because I am who I am. And there's very little left in my unconscious that is not, there's very little shadow left. Right? Now, I'm not going to say that I've transcended all of it, of course. I'm only 52. I got time left, But really, this is the task of our lives, right? Of our adult lives, is to kind of look at all of this and see, like, okay, where did I go? Where did this all happen? And what happened? And why do I feel this way? And now there's many different ways to get there, right? And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, psychotherapy and psychoanalysis is not helpful. It is for many, many people. And for many people, that is the answer. For many other people, this is the answer. For many people, the combination of the two is the answer, right? And there's no right or wrong there, right? But the point that I'm here to make, right, because this is not a psychology or a psychotherapy podcast and YouTube channel here. It's a mindfulness podcast and YouTube channel here, right? And what we do when we practice mindfulness, we practice presence. We practice acceptance of what arises in that present moment. We practice compassion towards the present moment in every form. And we practice an open curiosity about it all so that we want to know, right? And just like the Buddha did 2,500 years ago, it is all arrived at through introspection and self-awareness, right? That when we delve into ourselves and we really examine, again, with an acceptance, a curiosity, and a compassion and a presence, when we're examining ourselves in this way, right? And again, being accepting and compassionate of what we find, right? Not saying, oh, no, we can't have that. No, that's terrible. No, like hold it like a baby you would hold, right? Those aspects of yourself that are outliers, that are contradictory to what you've been made to believe, right? When we come into ourselves and we practice that level of awareness, that's when the unconscious becomes conscious. And that's where we can embrace it. And we can say, yeah, you know what? I'm a goofy MF, like that's just who I am, right? And when we can do that, that's when, again, we become truly who we really are. And when we're operating from who we truly really are, as I told you yesterday, there is only one person in the entire universe who is exactly like you. And there's only one person in the entire universe who has all of the beauty and the amazing combination of things that make you who you are. And so you have that is your gift, right? Your gift to the universe is you, right? Your ness, as I said yesterday. Another personal story of mine. So there's there's sort of a side of my family, right, who I've always kind of seen as very sort of jittery energy and very reactive and the other side of my family, right, is a little more cool, a little more laid back. They're from the city. They got their, the other folks are all in suburbs and rural areas that they grew up in. And so it's very much, as I grew up, again, because of my immediate role models and my immediate, compass points, right? I grew up thinking that, so my older cousin is the coolest kid in the neighborhood, right? And so I'm going to follow him, right? That's the person I'm looking up to. And he's the one that's mellow, and he's the one that's cool and slick and street smart and all that stuff, right? And so I grew up thinking that other, every time that jittery energy and that's it's almost like a squeaky energy that comes up, I felt that was bad. And that was something I had to just train out of myself. That was bad. Like, girls weren't going to like that. And I wasn't going to be cool if I was that way. And so for so many years, I was putting on this persona. I was putting on a mask that I was showing everybody. And behind the mask, I was crying, because I wasn't really me. I wasn't allowing myself to be me. I had to make sure I talked in a deeper voice, and I had to be cool, and I had to be mellow, and I had to let the world know how cool I was, right? But really what's happening is I'm this excited, squeaky person inside, and that's okay. And now that I've allowed that energy to arise, and I've allowed that to become part of my consciousness, and allow myself to truly be that, well, now I'm I'm who I am. And I'm really who I am all the time. I just recorded my my podcast for Learning to Surf with Adam Asdell, and we're talking today about the concept of what Adam started talking today about, started the episode out with, was how to know when to be a monk or when to be a warrior, was the content, the sort of theme of today's episode, and my first thing was, it's not one or the other, right? All of us have inside of us some level of warrior, and all of us have in us some level of monk, right? And it's that combination, that balance point, that mixture point, that's what life is all about, right? Finding that place where, and that kind of, brings us into a really important aspect in the compassion world, of forgiveness, right? Like a few weeks ago, as we all know, there was a terrible shooting in the area here in Boulder, Colorado, right? At a supermarket, right? And when we see things like that happening, it's really easy for us to say, like, that person is just an evil person and there's something wrong with that person, and they should be locked away forever because they're evil and they're broken and they're no good, right? So they belong locked away, right? And it becomes hard to forgive someone when you're thinking that way about them, right? When you're thinking that, oh, this person's just pure evil, then how do you forgive someone who's pure evil, right? So letting alone the fact that, that nobody is pure anything, right? Let's just step away from that for a second. We can come back to that another time. But really, really an important point here in this is that, when we can recognize that, and this is going to be a hard thing. I'm like having a hard time even saying this, right? Because it's a hard thing for people to sort of conceptualize, right? But the reality is that person who shot up those people, I mean, he has the same makings as me, right? He's made up of the same things. He has the same organs. He has the same, blood coursing through his veins. He experiences the same emotions as I do. He has the same thought process that I do. I mean, of course, he's going to be different from me, just in the sense that we're all unique, but he's still a human being. And as a human being, there are still certain parameters in which he operates. And so my point is that when we take that a little further, and again, with curiosity and acceptance, as well as presence and compassion, we can start to see that I have that in me too, that I am capable of that great violence as well. And I am. And so are you. All of us are, right? But we're also capable of great compassion as well. And that's the paradox of being human, right? That's that full catastrophe that Jon Kabat-Zinn talks about, is that life is all of it, right? And we are all of it, right? And so if we can recognize, and this is something that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about in his teachings, is that, he talks about pirates off the coast of Vietnam, right? Who do terrible, terrible things to people, right? And he talks though about these people in an air and an essence of forgiveness, because as he says, that given the same circumstances, if he, Thich Nhat Hanh, who was basically the embodiment of peace on earth, like nobody's more peaceful, like he is, like you might find people who are as peaceful, but certainly not many more, right? And here this man who is the literal embodiment of peace in humanity, right? He says that given the same circumstances, he too would rape and murder and steal and do horrible things. And that's how we can come to forgiveness. When we can realize that given the same exact circumstances, we would all pretty much do the same exact things. Now, of course, that's not all, that's not 100% all the time. There are certain people, of course, who are dealing with deep levels of pathology, and that's going to affect their morality and their ability. And so that's not all of us, right? But again, that's the essence of what I'm talking about, right? Like if you had those same psychic breaks and those psychological pathologies, well, again, would you be capable of it, right? And it's knowing that all of us are capable of that allows us to then accept it in another person, accept it in ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that you just let this person roam wild and just do it again, right? That's the thing about acceptance. It's not about just acquiescing and just, like, oh, well, it's the way of the world. I'm not here to change that. That would be very irresponsible, right? Because then other people will die, right? Because if this person has a pathology that makes them, do murderous things, Well, then leaving that person out on the street means that more people are going to be murdered, and that's not fair, and that's not right, and that's terrible for the people who are getting murdered. So there's, there's no antithetical, sort of opposition to forgiveness and doing something responsible, whatever you want to call justice or righteousness or whatever you want to call it, right? Like there's a doctor I've talked to you about who monitored patients in the burn clinic and saw that people who are willing to forgive whoever was responsible for their burns actually took the skin grafts at a rate of 4 to 1 or 1 to 4. That their bodies rejected their bodies would not reject rather the skin grafts. And the only difference between them and the people who rejected it out of 4 times for every one, the only difference is that the forgiveness. But the doctor specifically said that, just because you're forgiving them doesn't mean that you're not going to press charges or you're not going to sue them in court to get the damages and to get your medical bills paid for and get, retribution out of this, right? Like these are not antithetical concepts. They are not mutually independent of one another or mutually exclusive of one another. And so that's what forgiveness is, right? Forgiveness is saying like, yeah, I could be that person. And if I'm that person, well, then how can I, why would I feel an animosity towards this person? I can just let it go because I could be that person in the same exact circumstances. So I know that's a little deep, and I don't mean to kind of, well, anyway, it's out there. I would love to know your thoughts about some of this, because again, we're getting into some pretty philosophical areas here in these last couple of podcast episodes. And I would love to know your thoughts. I really would. I really would love to kind of continue this conversation on some level. So let me know what you think, please. I would really, really like to know. So you can send me an email and just, say, hey, this is what I think of it. Or you can schedule a call with me and we can have a conversation. And who knows what each of us will learn in that conversation. So it's an invitation that's open to you. There will be a link in the comments below, in the description below, rather. And I would really, really love to. I would really love that. I would love to connect with you. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to know what you feel about this whole aspect of the shadow and how important the awareness of the shadow is, and how this can facilitate our forgiveness and our own well-being, because that's ultimately the thing, right? That those people the doctor was talking about, they're literally physically suffering, right? They're physically unwell because not they're unwell because of the lack of forgiveness, not coincidental to, but it's because of. And so that's how important it is. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I wish you well. And I would love to hear from you and know what you think about all of this. And again, the bottom line here, the takeaway from all this is the cultivation of awareness. That in that cultivation of awareness, we can bring the unconscious into the conscious, and we can transcend this control that the shadow has over our lives. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.